In February 1995, a 233-year-old bank collapsed in 48 hours. Not because of a recession, not because of a crash, not because regulators finally caught up with decades of fraud. It collapsed because of one man, one trader, one secret account, and a number that in Chinese culture is considered the luckiest number you can find. The number was 88888.
Barings Bank had survived the Napoleonic Wars. It had financed the Louisiana Purchase, the deal that doubled the size of the United States. It had funded the construction of the Erie Canal. Queen Elizabeth II kept her personal accounts there. For over 2 centuries, Barings was not just a bank. It was a piece of British history. And in the final 90 days of its existence, a 26-year-old from a council estate in Watford, England, a kid who failed his A-level mathematics, had secretly accumulated losses of $1.4 billion, twice the entire bank's available trading capital. And nobody in London had any idea it was happening. When the bank's executives finally opened the books, what they found was so catastrophic that not even the Bank of England could save it. Barings was declared insolvent, and it was sold within days to a Dutch bank called ING for exactly £1. £1 for a 233-year-old institution that had financed empires. So who was this kid? How did he hide $1.4 billion? And why did a bank that survived Napoleon not survive a single trader in Singapore? That's what we're going to find out today.
Here's the part that makes the Barings story so strange. In 1993, Nick Leeson was not a disaster. He was a hero. His trading desk in Singapore generated over £10 million in profit, which accounted for 10% of Barings' total annual earnings from a single office in a single city. Peter Baring, the bank's chairman, was so impressed that he reportedly told a senior Bank of England official that it had become not terribly difficult to make money in the securities business. Nick Leeson earned a bonus of £130,000 that year, on top of his £50,000 salary. At 26, the man who would destroy the oldest bank in Britain was at that exact moment being celebrated as the reason the bank was thriving. And here's the thing that should bother you. At the exact same moment Leeson was being praised for those profits, his secret error account 88888, had already accumulated losses of £23 million. The profits London was celebrating were fake. The losses London knew nothing about were very real, and they had been growing quietly for over a year.
Which raises the only question that matters in this story. How does a 26-year-old with no college degree hide $23 million, then $200 million, then $1.4 billion from one of the most prestigious financial institutions in British history? The answer comes down to a flaw so simple it's almost embarrassing. And once you see it, you'll never look at a financial institution the same way again.
To understand what happened, you need to go back to July 1992, the very beginning. Nick Leeson had grown up on a council estate in Watford. Working-class background, father was a plasterer, mother was a nurse. He left school without going to university, started as a clerk at Coutts Bank, settling paper checks, moved to Morgan Stanley's back office, and in 1989, at 22 years old, joined Barings as a settlement clerk on a salary of £12,000 a year. He was good at untangling messes. In 1990, Barings sent him to Jakarta to sort through a backlog of £100 million in unreconciled share certificates, the kind of clerical disaster nobody else wanted to touch. He cleaned it up in 10 months. London took notice. In 1992, they sent him to Singapore. His job was to run Barings Future Singapore, both the front office, where trades were made, and the back office, where those trades were recorded and settled. That dual role is important. We'll come back to it. It's the crack in the foundation that the entire story falls into. On July 3rd, 1992, Leeson opened what's called an error account. Every trading floor has one. It's a holding account where small mistakes go. A junior trader enters the wrong number, the wrong amount, the wrong direction. You put the error in the account, fix it, close it out by end of day. Standard practice. Leeson named it account 88888. In Chinese numerology, 8 is the luckiest number. 5 eights is as lucky as it gets.
In hindsight, the name feels like a joke the universe was setting up. A few weeks later, one of Leeson's junior traders made a mistake. She sold 20 futures contracts for a client who wanted to buy them. The position went the wrong way. The loss was £20,000. Nick Leeson had built his entire reputation on being the man who never made mistakes. He was 25 years old, he was already making more money for Barings than entire teams in London. And he did not want anyone to know that someone on his desk had just cost a client £20,000. So he hid it in account 88888, just until he could trade his way back to even. That was the decision. That single, quiet decision on a trading floor in Singapore. That is where the $827 million loss begins.
What happened next is a story that has repeated itself throughout financial history and will almost certainly repeat itself again. Because what Leeson discovered, or maybe what he already knew, is that losing money in financial markets is not the dangerous part. The dangerous part is what you do after you've lost it. Leeson started using what's called a doubling strategy. Every gambler knows it by a different name. The idea is simple. If you lose, bet twice as much next time. If that bet wins, you've covered the first loss and made a small profit. If it loses, bet double again. The math says that as long as you eventually win, you always come out ahead. The math is also catastrophically wrong. Because doubling strategies don't fail slowly. They fail in one catastrophic moment when the position gets so large that the market moves against you before you get the chance to win it back. By the end of 1992, account 88888 was down £2 million. A year later, £23 million. By the end of 1994, just 30 months after that first $20,000 error, the account had accumulated losses of £208 million. And in London, nobody knew. Because of that flaw in the foundation from the beginning. Because Leeson controlled both the trading desk and the settlement office. He made the trades in the front office, he recorded what those trades said in the back office. He was, essentially, writing his own report card. Every time London asked for an explanation of the cash Leeson was requesting to cover margin calls, the daily payments traders make to the exchange to hold their positions, he had a story. A complicated client transaction. A timing difference between two exchanges. A settlement quirk. He was a gifted liar in a system that desperately wanted to believe him, because he was also the man generating 10% of their profits. There was even a memo, written inside Barings in November 1994, just 3 months before the collapse, that admitted, "It is becoming very clear that our systems and control culture are distinctly flaky." The memo was filed. Leeson kept trading. By January 1995, Nick Leeson was 27 years old, and he was drowning. Account 88888 held $208 million in losses. The only way out was a recovery in the Japanese stock market, the Nikkei 225 index. If the Nikkei went up, his positions would recover, and maybe, just maybe, he could close the gap before anyone discovered what was in the account. On January 16th, Leeson placed a bet that the Nikkei would stay stable overnight, not go up, not go down, just stay still. In options trading, this is called a short straddle. You collect a premium, and as long as the market doesn't move significantly, you win. The next morning, at 5:46 a.m., a magnitude 6.9 earthquake struck the Japanese city of Kobe. It lasted 20 seconds. It killed more than 6,400 people, and it sent the Nikkei plummeting. The market did not stay still. And what Nick Leeson did next is the part that defies belief. Because a rational person, at this moment, puts down the phone and calls London, tells someone, takes the loss, accepts the consequences. Leeson doubled down. In the 38 days between the Kobe earthquake and the bank's collapse, he purchased more than 20,000 futures contracts on the Nikkei, each worth approximately $180,000.
He was trying to move the market himself. By buying so aggressively, he believed he could push the Nikkei back up. He controlled at one point half of all open interest in Nikkei futures on the entire Singapore exchange.
Other professional traders noticed the enormous position, and they did exactly what you'd expect. They traded against him. Knowing that someone was desperately trying to prop up the market, they shorted it. Every dollar Leeson spent trying to save himself, the market pushed back harder. 3/4 of the final $1.4 billion loss happened in those last 38 days. Not over 3 years, in 38 days. On February 23, 1995, 2 days before his 28th birthday, Nick Leeson drove a rented Mercedes across the causeway from Singapore into Malaysia. He had a bag packed. His wife was with him. On his desk back at Barings Futures Singapore, he left a single handwritten note. It said 2 words, "I'm sorry." Barings executives called Singapore. No answer. They called his mobile. No answer. They checked his trading positions. And what they found made the blood drain out of the room. Account 88888, $827 million in losses. Positions that were still open, still bleeding. The Bank of England organized an emergency weekend meeting. Every major bank in London was called. Could anyone rescue Barings? Could anyone absorb these losses and keep the institution alive? The answer was no, because the losses were still growing.
Nobody knew how far they would go if the positions were unwound in a panicked market. The number was too big and too uncertain for anyone to touch. On February 26, 1995, Barings Bank was declared insolvent. Within days, ING, the Dutch financial group, stepped in with an offer. They would take on Barings' debts, its staff, its offices, its clients, everything. Their purchase price? £1. The bank that had financed Napoleon, that had built canals and purchased territories, that had managed the personal fortune of the Queen of England, it went for £1. Leeson fled to Malaysia, then Borneo, then Germany. He was arrested at Frankfurt Airport on March 2nd. He was extradited to Singapore, where he pleaded guilty to 2 charges of fraud and forgery, and was sentenced to 6.5 years in Changi Prison, one of the most brutal prisons in Southeast Asia. While inside, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. He survived. So here's what you take away from all of this. A 26-year-old from a council estate who failed mathematics at school brought down the oldest merchant bank in Britain, a bank that had survived wars, depressions, and 2 centuries of financial crises in 90 days. With a strategy that started with hiding a £20,000 loss and a system that refused to see it coming even when 7 separate people were trying to point at it. The bank sold for £1. Leeson went to prison, and the world moved on. Except the world didn't really change, because the same dual control problem, the same conflict of interest that let Leeson check his own work, has appeared in nearly every major trading fraud since 1995. Jerome Kerviel at Societe Generale in 2008, Kweku Adeboli at UBS in 2011. The script is almost identical every time. I want to know, before today, did you know this story, or did you just know the name? Drop it in the comments, because the details of Barings are the kind of thing that the financial press moved on from too quickly. If you want to actually understand how money works and how it breaks, subscribe, because the paper trail almost always leads somewhere nobody's looking.